Hello, 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 everybody. Let me go ahead and pull up the chat real quick. When you arrive, say hi, drop a comment, drop a like on the stream. Let me go ahead and I need some of these. This really helps. I can actually hear myself. Make sure the audio is good. All right, let's see who we've got in the house today. Tobias, Pavel, Justin, Amanda, Mark, Amanda in Ireland. Is that where you always are? I think is that where you always are? We got Mark here. We got Andy, El Hobe. Is that how you pronounce that? DeHunzi is here. We got Cease and David, D123, Justin, Ross. Look, we got a lot of familiar faces. Manny's here. Welcome, everybody. All right, so let's just talk about what we're doing here. At least once a month, sometimes more when we have more resources and more time, which I don't have right now because I'm 3 weeks behind on everything from travel and family being sick and so on and so forth. We try to do a ACSS live stream that is focused on helping you, the user, get the most out of ACSS. And if you're a beginner, that means helping you get started. If you're intermediate, it means helping you improve your workflow in certain areas. And if you're advanced, it means helping you solve some more complex challenges with Automatic CSS. And so this live stream for December 2023 is going to be a little bit of everything. If you're a beginner and we start answering some intermediate/advanced questions, just stick with us because we'll wrap back around and talk about beginner stuff as well. This is going to be kind of a free-for-all today. It's not just sit here and watch me do Q&A. I will pull up the dev site and we'll do plenty of demos, demonstration, to answer the questions. We can do little mini tutorials. Whatever needs to happen can happen in this live stream. It's fully interactive. It's not just me talking. So whatever you want to see, whatever you want to ask about, the only thing that I say is make sure it is clearly a question that you're asking by putting a capital Q or the word question in all caps. That makes it very easy for me to find these things as we go through the stream. And the chat does kind of start going faster at different points. So it can be hard to find your question if it's not clearly marked as a question. If it's been a while since your question was asked and you feel like, wow, that was a while ago, he's probably not going to scroll back up that far, feel free to ask the question again, and that'll put it back in view. Christian is here, Thomas, Halal, Ernesto, Ronnie. I see a lot of new faces too, which is fantastic. I like to see the familiar faces, but obviously we like to see a lot of new faces as well. We just had a very successful Black Friday. Growth for Automatic CSS is consistently growing. Like it's fantastic, but it's getting better every single month, which is great to see. But it means we have a lot of new people coming into the ecosystem. And, I will be the first to tell you, especially if you've never used a framework before, okay? Let me empathize with all of the people on the beginner side of things right now. If you've never used a framework before, if you aren't super adept at CSS, there is going to be a learning curve, okay? The learning curve for everybody, regardless of your talent. Now, obviously, if you've used a framework before, you're familiar with how everything works, obviously the learning curve is going to be less steep, right? But if you are a true beginner, you're not a beginner at development, okay? If you're a beginner at development and frameworks and obviously, our industry in general is just one big learning curve. And by the way, it never ends. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And the more there is to learn beyond that. You're never going to get to a spot where you're comfortable with what you know. And I think if you do get to a point where you're super comfortable with what you know, it probably means you stop challenging yourself and you've stopped your growth trajectory altogether. So I will say that. You never really want to be comfortable with where you're at. But if you are not like an ultra beginner to actual web design, you're just a beginner to frameworks and maybe CSS a little bit, the learning curve for Automatic CSS is like one brochure website. That's the learning curve to get the hang of it, okay? Then if you do another website after that, that's the learning curve to feel confident. So you can get, all right, I'm getting it. it's clicking. That's after like the first one. And then after the second one, you're like, oh, okay, we're rocking and rolling now. Things are speeding up. I'm really loving this. And then by the third site that you do, you're just never gonna build without automatic CSS ever again. That's pretty much the trajectory that most people follow, okay? So with that said, and I had this conversation with somebody the other day, it is like learning how to type, okay? And this is CSS and frameworks, because this was really answering a question. Somebody asked me, what course do I take to get better at CSS? And my answer was, there is no CSS course that I would recommend that you take. I would recommend that you watch the Page Building 101 series that I did on YouTube, which is 100% free. It's 19 to 20 episodes, okay? Many, many, many hours of training. Not all dedicated to CSS, mind you. What it's dedicated to is the fundamentals of web design with page builders. And what you're gonna find is that you pick up a lot of CSS by doing that course. But what you also find, and this is the path to learning in this industry, is you have to have a real world thing that you're trying to create or trying to build as your focus, as your target. This is not like we go into a classroom and we sit down and we learn concepts step by step. People try to do that with courses because that's what people do with courses in every subject. But our industry doesn't really work that well because CSS is not a linear thing. Once you know the ultra basics of like, what's an ID? What's a class? What's it like? Okay, that level of fundamentals, I guess you could learn in like a traditional format. But beyond that, you could go in an infinite number of directions based on what you need to do at the current time. Like if I sit down to solve one problem, it might mean that, I have to know what text orientation is because this calls for like vertical text. Well, that's something that would probably be at the end of a course because it's like not used all that often. But then you try to solve this other problem and it's like, no, you need a linear gradient for this. Okay, well now I gotta go learn linear gradient. But that wasn't until a later module in this course format because it was deemed that there was other more important stuff sooner. But really, the most important thing for you is the thing you're working on right now. And so here's how you learn. Here's how you learn CSS. Here's how you learn frameworks. You tackle a real project. Now, the level of project that you tackle matters. You don't want to tackle, the Apple website or the Stripe website. Stripe would not be a good first project for most people. But you pick a simple design and then you start to build it. And here's what you do when you're building. Okay, like I would say 2 fundamental rules. If you really want to get good and you want to get good faster, 2 fundamental rules. And I take it back to when I learned typing. And really it's probably with anybody who's learning typing. How do you learn how to type? You force yourself to not look at your fingers. You are not allowed. You just have to You've got to, I don't care how slow you type. You've got to do it without looking. That's what you just have to do that to learn how to type, okay? The more you look at your fingers, the more your brain is not going to push you to that next level, okay? You have to take the same exact concept into CSS and web design, okay? So what you do is you do a real world problem and you're gonna run into a problem. Maybe you run into it very early because you're like, shit, I don't even know a background color. I don't even know how to set background color in CSS, okay? So then what you do, you look it up. How do I do it? You read it, and then you leave it. You don't put it on the screen over here and just stare at it while you type, okay? You close the window, and then you go back and you start to write the CSS. And you write it without being able to look at anything. What did I just learn? Okay, now I'm gonna try to write it without looking at anything, and you try to write it out. And if it doesn't work, you pull up the docs again, and you're like, all right, what part did I miss? Oh, forgot a semicolon. Got it, okay, now you go back, you do it again. And basically, you are following the philosophy of, when I'm writing the instructions, when I'm writing the CSS, I'm not going to look at documentation. I'll look at documentation ahead of time to try to absorb it and learn it, but then when I actually do it, I'm not gonna stare at it while I do it, okay? That's number 1. And the second thing is no more copy pasting. No more copy pasting. Everybody's like, do you have a code snippet for that? Do you have a CSS snippet for that? You have a No, you're not allowed to copy paste. Just like you're not allowed to stare at the docs while you write, you're not allowed to copy paste either. And I don't care if you're like, well, I got a deadline, no, you always have a deadline. There's always an excuse, okay? The minute you force yourself to not stare at code while you write it, or copy and paste code, that is the day you will start getting better and faster. And the same is true with using a framework. You have to be okay with not knowing the answer. You have to be okay with moving very slow initially. Because on the back end of learning automatic CSS, like getting through the learning curve, is ultra speed, ultra efficiency, and ultra maintainability. All very invaluable things. That's what you're trying to get to. But you do have to move like a turtle in the very beginning to get there, okay? But the benefits on the other side are really tremendous. And that's why I've said in Page Building 101, I want to empower as many people as possible. The page builder should be a tool that you use as a web designer, not a crutch. If it's a crutch, can you really call yourself a professional, right? I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, this tool does most of the stuff for me, okay? Now, in terms of, PHP and JavaScript, I've made it very clear, like, you don't have to go to that level. That's not really front-end development is HTML and CSS for the most part, okay? If you want to be a professional, like on the front-end design side of things, you need to know HTML and CSS. Just bottom line, if you're relying on the page builder to write all the CSS, you have no idea what the page builder is doing when it's writing CSS. You're an assembler of websites. You're not a true professional web designer / front-end developer. I want you to get to that point. I want you to be like, okay, HTML, CSS, that's the thing that I need to know. The page builder can do PHP for me. It can do JavaScript for me. But HTML, CSS, I got to know those things. And I got to be able to work around the limitations of the page builder. You see that all the time in my tutorials. When you start doing advanced projects, there's just stuff the page builder cannot do. And you've got to be able to maneuver around the limitations of the page builder as a working professional. That's what I want to empower people to be able to do, not relying on the builder anymore. If you want to use the builder inputs because, hey, this is faster for me at the time, you see me do that all the time. But I'm not reliant on, if I have to just literally sit there and write the entire style sheet, I can write the entire style sheet. So that's where I want to get everybody to. That's the level I think everybody should be playing at if you care about being a professional in this industry, okay? So that's just a little bit of background and talk about, because people have asked me, learning curve, ACSS, and is it worth it? And where are we going eventually? And what do I need to know versus what do I not need to know? That's kind of my general answer. But I'm going to go back to the chat here, and then we're going to start answering questions. Let's see. Dimitri says he's a little bit late today. Hey, no worries. You are here. That's what matters. Never wrote CSS or used a framework. You're 100% correct. Learning from scratch and trying until I get it right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Good. All right. There's some questions. I will get to those. Don't worry. To be a fresh-faced newbie. You guys are in for a world of, that's so cool. Yes, absolutely. The other thing I would say too, if you're a beginner, some beginners discount. We had this discussion in the chat the other day, which was phenomenal. Some beginners discount advanced tutorials. The tutorial that I posted at Geary Co. yesterday has a mix of everything. We start out beginners can track for the first third of it, and then I'll probably lose you if you're an ultra beginner after that point. Your head's spinning what's going on here? But you should not exit the tutorial at that point. What you should do is continue watching the tutorial, because what you want to see is you're not trying to learn at that point. You're not like, ooh, I've got to retain. No, we're not in retention mode anymore. We're not even in learning mode. What you're in is possibilities mode. You need to know, I said with the image, let me pull it up. Maybe I can pull it up. Let me screen share. Okay, we're on the correct screen. Because this is a very, very good lesson. I think I deleted the site. But I think I have a screenshot of it. Let me pull this up. Let me see if I still have the screenshot from what I shared. All we need is the screenshot. Yeah, here we go. Okay, this is it right here. All right, you guys should be able to see this. All right, there we go. All right, I'm checking the, yeah. That's sharing properly. Okay, this image situation right here. I will tell you guys right now, a pure beginner that doesn't know anything, obviously they don't know anything about CSS, like a pure beginner, okay? They're a website assembler. They're not a web designer, all right? They just assemble things with a tool. They don't really know what they're doing beyond that. They would absolutely 100% of the time take this photo into Canva and they would chop it like this. And they would put this blue accent behind it in Canva, and they would put this number on it in Canva or Photoshop or Figma. I don't care what the tool is. Point is, it's a third-party tool. It's not being done with CSS. Okay, so when I say a beginner should not leave a tutorial when it gets overwhelming, this is why. Because it's not about learning how to do this with CSS. It's about understanding that that's even a possibility. Because a lot of people run to Photoshop or Canva because they're like, CSS can't be possible in CSS. I'm just gonna do it in Canva and move on with my life. But once you know it's possible, and then you hear somebody say, you actually have to do it. Like no professional front-end developer, web designer, whatever you wanna call them, would ever chop this photo in Canva, would ever put the number on the photo in a design tool. Never would they do that. Okay, so you need to know that as a beginner, because now you need to know, oh, what I was about to do, like my go-to method of solving this problem is a no-fly zone for everybody in this. Like anybody that knows what they're doing would never do that. You need to know that as a beginner. So you don't need to learn how to do it. You need to learn it's possible, and you also need to learn what not to do and what to do. And you can get that from advanced tutorials, not watching the tutorial to try and absorb and memorize, but watching the tutorial to understand the thought process that we're all trying to follow, right? And you can immediately, like when you're watching other people teach, I mean, if they do stuff like, chopping photos in Canva and putting text on images, like immediately you should be like, oh my God, let me check, who am I, why am I watching this again? Okay, and you can exit and you can go watch something that's actually going to teach you a better way to do stuff. So I think that's always valuable. Don't leave tutorials, you go, oh, this is above my head, I'm not gonna learn it. No, you are gonna learn how they think, learn how people at a higher level than you approach problems. You don't need to understand the solution, but you need to understand that it is a workable thing. And don't run to a solution that's not actually a solution, even though it's easier. It's definitely easier to bring that in Canva and chop it up and throw a number on it, 100%. Like, and this is why I always reject, one of the arguments of doing things a certain way, especially with page builders, like styling at the ID level for an example, people will say it's faster, but you have to reject that. We're not concerned with front-end speed when we're creating a back-end nightmare. If you're creating a back-end nightmare, but you're getting to the nightmare faster, nobody cares. Nobody cares that you got to the nightmare faster, okay? What we care about is that you get to the right conclusion, okay? And if that takes a little bit longer, what matters is you got to the right conclusion. All right, nobody wants to race to a nightmare. We're not racing off the edge of a cliff. That's a dumb argument, okay? So anytime somebody makes that argument, you can just immediately reject it. Like, is that our number one concern? Is that our number one concern is that we got to the cliff faster and dove off? That's not the number one concern. All right, Jamie says, working with the marketing team right now who are doing that in Photoshop, the uploading a 12 megabyte PNG, apparently the dropdown in the, yeah. So, I mean, look at all of the challenges with that. Just so everybody's on the same page. I mean, you don't have to take my word for it, right? First of all, the auto alternating. If you're hard coding this, I say hard code. I don't know embedding. If you're manipulating the image file to create the slants, and you have to reorder these steps, okay? Like if you, let's see how to communicate this the best way. If you were to do this in Canva, what you are suggesting is, number one, this will never change. There is no reality in which the order of these steps could possibly change. You would have to be making that argument, right? Because if they do need to change, and it could be, the other thing you're saying, not just the order of the steps, whether the client likes this slant, okay? What if the client wakes up one day and they're like, I don't like that slant. Can we get rid of that? And you have to be like, well, about that. Because maybe you did this to 30 freaking photos And then, do you even have the source photos anymore? Well, you got to go find the source photos. You got to bring them back in. Do you have the original copies of those photos without the slants? Because now you got to go resave them all, re-upload them all just to fix the slants. And then what if they're like, oh, well, our brand colors changed. That color back there that's behind the image, that's got to change now. Oh, about that. Now we got to go reopen the photos all again, bring them back in, change the background, bring them back. Oh my God, you have jumped off an absolute cliff if you do this in a design tool, right? So that's why no professional would ever do that. No professional would ever do this. The reordering at that point is like the least of your concerns. So there are reasons why people will try to say everybody can do it the way that they want to. No, there's an objective reality that's a nightmare, and then there's an objective reality that's not a nightmare. A maintainable reality where we all have fun and we all don't waste hours of our time on meaningless, trivial tasks. You got me choked up. Okay, we're on to questions. Preface this with, I will limit the frames questions. We're gonna do a separate live stream, all dedicated to frames this month, okay? Probably on Thursday of this week. If not Thursday of this week, next week. But there will be a dedicated one to frames. If there's not enough ACSS questions for whatever reason, that's never happened, but if for whatever reason we're light on ACSS questions, maybe I'll take some frames questions, but I'm gonna prioritize ACSS questions. All right, so I'm gonna go back up. All right, let's get to the start of where I see the first question. Okay, first one was family all better now. Yes, thank you for asking. It started out as the flu, and then they got better. And then for 48 hours, they were better. And then they just went in the tank again. And I was like, that's not normal. So then we went back to the doc and they were like, now it's strep. So, two of them had strep, two of them had pneumonia. So it was like two different things too, going on at the same time. It was tough to figure out and navigate, but we're all better now. Thank you. And I evaded it. I bobbed and weaved. Successfully, did not get it. So yes, thankfully that happened. All right, let's go down. Okay, have you tried the multi-template import in the latest bricks? I'm thinking of using that as a way to have my edited, altered frames, templates, any other cool uses of multi-source. That's a frames question. I haven't done it yet, but the short answer is yes, you could absolutely have your own source site for your own versions of various frames, starting with the original frames, obviously, but then creating your own source site out of them and loading that up too and having access to both at the same time. That is a definite possibility. Turn this to shadow color. Okay, this is an ACSS/frames question. I'm trying to change the box shadow on content section Foxtrot images. When trying to set box shadow color, raw to box shadow L, no apparent change. Any suggestions? Okay, well, this is one that we have to look at. All right, so let's go ahead and get in. Actually, I made a mistake. Let's go back. I would just say publish these pages. If you're doing tests, I've had issues with when it's a draft, some front end issues. I don't know if it's bricks or WordPress. I think it's WordPress because I have some issues with blog posts, not when it's in draft mode. So I don't know. But let's go up to templates and use. Oh well, do I not even have? Let's make sure I have everything loaded up on this one. Otherwise, we got to use a different site. Plugins. It should have frames on it. It does. License, save and activate. Maybe that's a problem. And this does have the latest version of bricks as well, I believe, which shouldn't cause any problems. That's 1.9.4. Let's do automatic CSS while we're here. Okay. All right. Let's go here. I'm gonna go on a different screen real quick. 1 second. Count. Okay. I'm just gonna grab I don't know why. It doesn't really even matter. This is supposed to be pulled from the dev from VS Code. All right, let's go to settings up here. And what's it under? Templates. Let's just resave that for a second. Okay, let's go back and I just want to make sure that the Oh, is this the, okay, I'm just seeing it different. I guess this is the change now. I just updated it before the live stream, so I haven't seen this little drop down. I guess that's how they're doing the multiple remote templates area. I was looking for the original tabs. Damn it, I just made documentation screenshots and they have the 2 tabs. This is my life. This is my life. Now I have to go retake those screenshots because people aren't, they're like, oh, mine doesn't look like that. This is the life, man. This is the life. Okay, so here's the Get Frames library. We'll hit refresh to make sure we have all of the correct stuff. And you said, now that we've done all that nonsense, what frame did you say? Content section Foxtrot. Content section Foxtrot, right here. Okay, let's go ahead and insert that, and let's get rid of that section up there. Box shadow on the images. So here's an image right here. It does not have CSS, but I see it does have a box shadow, and it has a manual box shadow in there. Okay, so you're saying that when you try to use a variable like box shadow, and you do box shadow M, for example, I get a box shadow. And when you do L, I get a bigger box shadow, and XL, I get a bigger box shadow. So those variables are working, and that would be the way to change them. Now you can do that either here. Now I'll show you one other thing you might want to look at if that's not working for whatever reason. But if I'm in border box shadow and I go to the color field, this is the backdoor raw, paste that variable here, it's gonna work there as well. So that's L, there's M, and it's going through all of them just fine. If yours, for whatever reason, are not going through everything just fine, let's go to Automatic.css, let's go to additional styling, and right here under box shadows, this is one area of the framework that you are allowed to change the name. So if you've changed L, for example, here's L by default. If you've changed this to like, I don't know, great, like, or whatever you wanted to call it, box shadow 1, 2, whatever you put here, L will no longer work, right? Because you've renamed both the variable and the class are renamed from right here. So I would go check this area and make sure that you haven't adjusted anything, because if you have, then the default is not going to work. If you've tried both of those things and it's just not working, that's where you go into the ACSS community and you hit new post and you go, my box shadows effed up, and then you give a link, okay? Make sure you give a link because we can't help you without a link. But then if you give a link, we can actually jump in and solve the problem for you. Hopefully that helps you, David. All right, let's see. Okay, next question. When you do the CSS edit on a BIM stack, like on the video yesterday, is it the best approach to do this on the top level, like the card grid or the individual selectors? You seem to switch back and forth. Really good question. Really, really good question. Let's add a section. Let's add a grid. I'm thinking of a specific use case that we might want to do this. I mean, it is kind of the auto alternating. Here's what I'll say. Off the top of my head, there could be certain use cases where this doesn't apply. Sometimes, like yesterday, you saw me do the auto alternation at the main wrapper level. So all of those cards were in a wrapper, and I used the wrapper CSS to switch all the cards. You don't have to do that. I trained myself to do it that way before Bricks had a dynamic root selector. And sometimes when you train yourself to do it a certain way because of a limitation of some sort, and then you want to start doing it a different way, especially when you're trying to do a tutorial, and I don't like edit my tutorials, like I literally turn on the camera and I just start doing the thing and I just talk and I just try to do stuff the best I can, thinking about a gazillion different things. And so you fall back into like some old habits. Now that Bricks has a dynamic root selector, it really depends on, I would say do it at the block level, okay? And here's why, and we'll just cover the dynamic selector. So I'm gonna put a block in here, all right? And we'll just call this a my card, right? And I'm gonna say this is my card right here. And then this my card is going to have a bunch of child elements, like it's going to have a heading and it's going to have text and it's going to have a button. Great. Fantastic. We'll say that that's a paragraph tag. On the container, obviously, I need to put my grid, and this might be my grid right here, because this grid might be used, in a different context than these cards. This card is a parent block, so it gets its own set of classes. It's not like a child of the grid. But these heading, text, buttons, these are children of the card, right? So they get their own classes. So it would be like my card, heading, and then this would be my card, text, and this would be my card, button. Now buttons are a little bit different because typically all your buttons look the same. It's not gonna look different because it's in this card. So it's a situation, sometimes you'll see an item have two different classes and it's like, why is that happening? I don't know. And in this my card button class might be even blank. It might be blank, okay? And you're like, I just don't understand that. It has button action, that gives the action button styling. What is this other class for? It just seems to be useless. I don't know. It's for future proofing purposes. This is what I call an insurance class. Okay, this is just insurance. And here's why it's insurance. So I'm gonna go duplicate this a couple times, and I'm gonna go to my container, my grid, which we're gonna display as a grid. And we're just gonna say this is gonna be a 3-column grid, and then we're gonna have a grid gap, okay? Very, very typical standard stuff. So now I come into my card and I might want to add some padding. So I'm just gonna say space im. Just for all the beginners here, there's no such thing as padding in variable land or margin in variable land or gap in variable land, except for grid gap and context. This is so hard to explain because of all the different contexts, but it's all just space. Margin, padding, gap, it's all just space, right? So you just say, I want space. Where do I want the space? Oh, well, I want it in margin or I want it in padding, but the value you're referencing is just a spacing value. It's not a specific type of spacing. The specific type of spacing is defined where you put the value, okay? Where you put the token. So there's my spacing there. Now in row gap, we do have a content gap because this defines a context for where the spacing is going to be applied. And then you can even do calcs of your content gap like that, okay? So here we are. Now let's put a little background color on here just to be, give this a little bit of structure here. You guys probably can't even see that because of the stream quality. Let's just do something like that. Okay, here we are. So now the question is, I need custom CSS I need custom CSS for whatever reason to style these children. Where should I put the custom CSS? So do I click on the heading and go to the CSS box and write it here? Just keep that question in your mind for right now. Hold that thought, right? Because the next question is, if I need to do custom CSS here, do I go here and write the custom CSS? And then if I need the button, and we're gonna get back to this class right here. Don't let me forget this insurance class. I wanna explain that, okay? Do I then come here and put custom CSS on the button? The answer in the old days of page building was you put it here and here and here. Because we had a root selector that would reference the class, right? But that root selector was kind of, dumb. It was like, it could only reference the class that you were actually on at the time. And the obvious downside of putting CSS here and here and here is that you have CSS in 3 different places. And if you're hunting things down, it's like, where is it? It's always a game of where did I put it, right? But now we live in a different scenario because we've been given a better tool. So this root selector, if I put root, it's gonna reference my card, obviously, and then I can do things to the card. Like I could say padding 8M, and there you go. Like it goes out of control, right? But I don't even have to write the name of the class. That's what the old selector did. But what I couldn't do with the old selector is style children with it. But now I can style children with it. So if I do root, and then that was heading, right? Now I can say font size and like 8M, there you go. Like I'm actually able to control the children from the parent with custom CSS. And you might say, well, why is this better? Well, it's better for 2 reasons, 2 big reasons. Number 1, all my CSS gets to live in the same area now. So there's no more hunting things down. And number two, if I ever need to rename the class, my CSS will not break. Like I can freely rename any of these classes. Any one of them can be renamed, and none of the custom CSS is going to break. That wasn't possible before. And that's why before you had to put it on the heading, because the only way the dynamic root selector would work is if it was on the actual element, and that would give you that unbreakable CSS. Now we can do that unbreakable CSS from the parent, and we get the benefit of putting it all in one place. So I would say do it from the parent. Whatever allows you to use that dynamic root selector the best. That was a long answer, but that's the reasons. You got to understand that I could just give you the answer, but you still wouldn't understand why. I could just say, take my word for it for everything. But like I try to explain the why behind things. Now let's talk about this. This is insurance, right? Should there be a situation where that button styling needs to change, and let's say that that insurance class was not there, all you have is that class right there. You know what you need to do? You need to add another class. And you know what you can't do once all the cards have been duplicated? Add another class. Unless, like a chump, you go one by one by one. Like you would literally have to go, add it here. Click this one, add it here. Click that one, add it here. And there could be, I don't know how many there are now, right? Because maybe you added 40 of them before you realized, I need to change that. So this is insurance, because let's say that that needs to be small text, right? So I could do my card button. I don't change this one because this one would affect every button on my website. This one only affects the ones in this context of this my card situation, right? And so you can go in here and you can say text S, and if it's not working because of specificity issues or whatever, you can importantize it, or you can come down here into custom CSS. You can add additional specificity. Here's a trick that often works. Like you do root. I actually don't know if these can be chained together like this. Let's do a little experiment. Font size, text S, because in CSS typically, there it is. Okay. You can trick specificity by referencing the same class twice, right? That's what effectively this is doing right here. I didn't know if we'd need the period or not, but you're basically chaining the same class to itself, and you can increase the specificity without having to use important, which would then just, that would just kill specificity from that point forwards. This is a little trick. I'll zoom in here so everybody can see. But look how I was able to make a small text button without having to manipulate my normal button class, and without having to go through and adding a new class to all of these elements. See, when we build frames, we realize, there could be a situation where they need to change the styling of just the buttons within that context. So we give you an insurance class. That's all that is. It's just a class for insurance. You may not need it. It may stay blank for the rest of time, but it's there in case something happens. That's why I call it an insurance class. Okay, hopefully that explained that. Did that make sense for everybody? Are we learning new things? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Unfortunately, I can't go to the bottom of the chat to see what people are saying about the thing I just did, because then I lose my space on where the questions were. All right, AutoBIM, I see an AutoBIM question. I tried using AutoBIM, but discovered not all sub items didn't get the name change that I'd expected. Are there any restrictions where AutoBIM doesn't affect all sub items? Fantastic question. Popular question. I'm getting a phone call. This better not be Bev. It's not Bev. Let's see. I just gotta make it's my wife. I just gotta make sure, no emergencies, whatever. We'll get right back to the regularly scheduled program. I'll just message her and see what she ends up saying. Okay. This AutoBIM question is phenomenal. I've answered it about a dozen times. I'm in the middle of writing a doc for it. I will be putting it in the video on AutoBIM. The reason there hasn't been an AutoBIM video yet is because we're waiting on one final feature, and this is the this is a game-changing feature. I'll just tell you exactly what it is. Instead of deleting existing classes and replacing them with a new class, which is, a little bit dangerous, we can just rename classes, right? You know that if you rename a class right now, it doesn't matter, because when you import the same frame, it just imports it with the new class name, because classes and bricks are actually tied to a unique ID on the back end, so that they still work like classes, but the reason they can be edited, their name, is because all the instructions for the class are saved independent from the name of the class, okay? So renaming a class doesn't really help anything other than it, like, you might feel better because it has your name instead of our name, but functionality-wise, it doesn't help anything. So you have to currently delete the class and replace it with your new class, and that requires copying the styles from the old one to the new one. Now, AutoBIM does that for you automatically, but it's still a little dangerous. What we're doing is we're kind of hijacking bricks, and now you're gonna be able to rename the class, and that's gonna effectively be like you deleted it, but without actually deleting it. Because when you import a new frame, we're gonna put a check in to see, was its name changed? I think that's how the logic works. Like, was its name changed? And if it was, import a fresh version of that frame. And if it wasn't, just import the frame again, whatever. There's probably more stuff going on with the logic, but it's gonna let you rename classes the way that it should be, the way that the workflow should be. Once that's ready, then I'll make the video. But to answer your question, if I bring in a frame, wow, I gotta get used to this. My brain's like, it's broken, because I don't see the things I normally see. Okay, let's see which one would be good. Probably this one right here would work just fine. So we bring in article section Juliet, all right? I think I'm way zoomed in. I am, okay. So let's just take a look at the structure here of article section Juliet. If you wanna understand AutoBIM, it's called AutoBIM, right? It's not called auto rename your classes however which way you want to. It follows the logic of BIM. What BIM says is there are things called blocks, and a block can live within a block. But what also can live within blocks are elements. That's the E in BIM, is elements. Elements belong to that block, but blocks belong to themselves. Now, when you're auto-BIMing something, that assumes that it's you're targeting the E's part of BIM, right? You want to rename elements, right? Or class elements. So if we open article section Juliet, let's pop quiz. We'll just do a pop quiz. We'll make this very interactive. Is this a block or an element? Just very quick in the chat, just go ahead and write it. Is this a block or an element? Bradbury says we need an auto bev. Absolutely. Imagine just like Bev just chats in your ear and you click a button called auto bev and it just rejects all of her bad ideas. And then any idea that's like, all right, that's acceptable, it just automatically does it for you. That would be fantastic. We'd make a lot of money doing that. Justin got it right. That is a block. Okay, we'll move on. We don't need everybody's answer. Justin got it right. That's a block. Okay, we open this up. Intro Bravo. Element or block? Element or block? Intro Bravo. Okay? Block, 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 block. Got it. Article grid Juliet. Oh, that's a tough one. We have article section Juliet, and inside of that, article grid Juliet. Is article grid Juliet a block or an element? Block or element? Can we change Bev's name to Bud? No, there's a male and a female, equal representation of terrible clients, okay? We got Bev, and what's the other guy's name? I have photos of them in the inner circle. AI renditions of them, we'll say. Okay. Fred. It's Bev and Fred. Bev and Fred. Article grid Juliet is a block. Okay, that's very important to understand because what people will do is they'll come to article section Juliet and they'll go AutoBIM. And this is a nightmare scenario, guy. You do not want to do this. Do not do this. No fly zone right here because there's no elements. There's no elements to rename, okay? You've not found any elements yet. Now, if we open article grid Juliet, we're gonna see a list item. Oh, this actually isn't a, yeah, it is, okay, it is. There's just an extra thing. Article card Juliet, block or element. Oh, it's a child of article grid Juliet, but what is it? Is it a block or an element? Guys, we still have not found any elements. This is a block also. So I open this up. Now I found children. Look, I found elements. Article card Juliet is the only thing in this frame situation that can be auto-BIMmed. When I click on this, notice it's going to give me an option now. It's identified elements. Whereas if I click up here on article section Juliet, no elements have been identified. Like, it does detect all these children, but I don't have a drop down for how to handle this because it's not recognizing that there's anything that's part of article section Juliet. It hasn't identified any renameable or deletable or whatever elements. But article card Juliet actually has elements inside of it. And now it's giving me an option of how to handle these. Okay, so I can rename them, create new, keep old, create new, delete old, create new, remove old. I got many different options available to me. But this is where AutoBIM works, okay? When you're renaming frames. And in 99% of cases right now, you wanna choose create new and delete old. That is the option that you want. Renaming, like I already said, as of today, is mostly useless. It's just gonna make you feel better because you got your name, right? But functionality-wise, what you want is create new and delete old. And that way, this frame is now yours to do what you want with it, and you are always free to import a clean version of it, regardless of what you do to this edition, all right? That's the best way to explain that. Now, in the next update, you will be able to rename, and that does the exact same thing as what currently create new and delete old does, but it's safer, and that will be the new workflow going forward. See why I can't make the video yet? Because I don't want to say this in the video. I don't know, well, today and then tomorrow, I just want to wait until it's the way that I want it to be, and then I'll make the video for it. So that's why there's no current video, but hopefully I explained that. You can't auto BIM just blocks that don't have elements because there's no EM. Right? It wouldn't be auto BIM at that point. There's no EM part of it, right? You need the E's and the M's in order to use auto BIM. The other thing that auto BIM is for is when you're doing something from scratch. So like that grid situation, let's say that I do this as a grid 3 right here, and then I come in and I do a block, and there's the my card situation. So my card, this might be my card 2, and then I put a heading in there, right? And I put a bunch of stuff in there, and I'm like, I don't want to do all those manually. So I just come here and I say BIM, and it's saying detected the block. This is my card 2, like this. And then, actually I think, yeah, we can just do my card 2, like that. And then I can sync the labels, okay? So it'll actually put my card 2 there instead of block, but I apply classes, there's my card 2, there's my card 2 underscore heading. Now, that was one element, so it's like, that didn't really save much time. But a lot of times there's, like, when I build frames, and there's 20 elements, God, I love AutoBIM. Like, I just get it all worked out in the structure panel, then I click AutoBIM, and it just classes them all up. And I'm like, that is absolutely a lifesaver. So that's the other way to use AutoBIM. When you're doing things from scratch, AutoBIM all day. When you need to remap frames classes, that's when you AutoBIM as well, but it has to be a block with elements. It cannot just be a block by itself, because then you're not BIMing anything. You're just changing the name of a block. Okay, that's my explanation for that. Let me go back up, find where we were. Okay. We did that one, we did that one, we did that one. When you use this, no, we did that one. Please some hints to use ACSS with static pages. Christian, I need more clarification on exactly what you mean and what you're looking for, and then I will answer that question for you. Where are link, underline, offset, and text decoration thickness? Underline is in the docs, but I don't see it in the ACSS dashboard. Yeah, it should be. Let's see, close, go back. Okay, I don't know if thickness is off the top of my head. Let's look. Buttons and links, and then link default. So the link decoration is underline, then you're gonna get an offset, right? There won't be an offset input if you haven't selected underline in the first place. There is currently no thickness. You do have the weight of the text of the link itself, which I believe does impact the thickness. If you have a bold text, it's gonna be a bolder line underneath it. But if we want to add thickness to the line, we can add that for sure. Just, make that a feature request and we'll do it. But if you're not seeing the link underline offset field, it's probably because you have like none selected or something like that. It requires you to have an underline. Hopefully that answers that. All right, let's see. Can you add an option to set link decoration color under link options in ACSS? It kind of is. Let's see. Okay, link decoration hub. Well, now that's going to be on inherit. I need the use case for it because let's go to this builder. We do have link classes, and a lot of times those get the job done. So let me do something like, we can even do this with a rich text to show you how this works, even when it's not an individual link. This technically should work if I remember back to the old days of how this was done. Website ipsum.com. Okay, I just want like text. There we go. So let's put that in, and then let's say that this is a link. Okay, bang, there's our link. All right, so let's go to the front end and let's just see how these interact. So obviously right off the bat, it's going to inherit your action color. Because if we go into buttons and links, there's your link color by default is set to action, and the hover is set to action hover. All right, let's get rid of this tab. We don't need it. Here's the front end. So if I hover over that, it's getting a little bit lighter. And of course you have control over exactly what that does. If you want it to be a completely different color, you can make that by default. Now, if you want to underline all of your links, text decoration, underline, save changes, right? Settings you save. Oh, now we need an offset. So there's another, and this is why the error tells you what's going on, right? Hey, you did underline, but we need to know what the offset is. I think we're going to make this like an inherit or auto or something like that, so we don't actually need a value. But let's do 0.25 em or something like that. And so we'll hit save, and then we will refresh. Now I have an underline link with an offset that I control, okay? And that's going to happen to all of my links by default because that's what I did in the dashboard. Now, if I want to change, let's see, and I don't think I have pro mode on. So let's go with link accent as an example. See what just happened? In one context, let's close this tab now. Let's close this tab now. In one context, I was able to just swap the link color, right? Like, and it was even in a paragraph. It wasn't even like, I didn't even click on the actual link. I just put the thing on the rich text element itself. And now I have an accent colored link. And I could do that with like base, right? Like if you want to do it with the base color, link base. Okay, now it's the same color as the text because the text is base color. And look what happens on the hover. It uses the base hover color and it uses the accent hover color before. That's how you can change link colors on the fly with these link classes. Now, if you want to do something beyond that, like if that doesn't do what you are needing, let me know, because then I can tell you how to do the next phase of it. Like what is the next thing you need to be able to customize? But I wanted to highlight that because a lot of people don't realize that that's there. And they also don't realize that you can put it on an entire paragraph and it'll still work. Let's see. On Hero Oscar on the mobile breakpoint, the middle image is the only one that shows. Okay, that's a frames question. We'll do this in the frames. Save these for the frames Q&A. Bev is a reality, a nightmare reality at times, yes. Did you switch to ACF from Metabox? Yes, I wrote a blog article at geary.co explaining why, so I would just point you to that. Do you need to adjust any default settings in ACSS to use it for the first time with bricks? The defaults that you use in ACSS are your preferential defaults. They don't have anything to do with the builder that you use, but there are a couple things you want to do in the builder when you're setting up the builder. Not very much, like 2 or 3 things. But there's a whole setup doc. Just go read the setup doc and it'll answer all of your questions. Am I missing the new ACSS cheat sheet somewhere? I'm using the Excel style sheet and it's the opposite of pleasant. The old one was fantastic. No, the new one is right after we release 3.0, the cheat sheet is the next thing in line. I will say that the JSON refactoring that was the cheat sheet was waiting on is basically done. And so right now, every resource we have to dynamically generate, probably with Vue or Svelte or something like that, the new cheat sheet from the JSON. It's like a little mini project. And I think, and here's why I think this is true. I think most users want us to get 3.0 out as fast as possible versus taking resources away from 3.0 to get the new cheat sheet out. And here's why, mainly because there's a cheat sheet right here for the most part. Like inside the builder, you just kind of type the thing you're looking for and it's going to find it for you. That's a right click on the classes box. And then if you're right clicking on inputs and stuff, right, there's all the variables like you could use. You even have a live preview of them. So yeah, I know the cheat sheet is useful in some contexts, but it's not like you're just, you know, you don't have a guide of anything whatsoever. Like this does a really good job of guiding you to what you need to do in and of itself. So for that reason, now if that didn't exist, I would say, guys, we got to get the new cheat sheet out ASAP. But because these tools exist in the builder, you do have most of what you need for guidance, then, you know, we're just focused on 3.0. That's kind of what we're doing. How can we delete unused, unwanted classes? I know about the pro mode. Can you please dive in on it a little bit? Oh, like not use classes. Yeah, pro mode is really the main option right now. I activate this on every single website. These are actually kind of my preferences. Section padding classes stay on, breakout classes. I would actually turn these off. Most of my builders, I turn off breakout. It's not something you need all the time. And then if you need it, just come and turn it on and then you're ready to rock and roll. Position classes, centering classes, I actually turn all these off. Grid classes, I leave those on. Gap classes, I leave those on. Flexbox classes, I turn off. Width classes, I keep on. I use those very often. Radius classes, I turn off. Mainly because, and some of these things we left on because too many people would like try to use them and then forget that they're turned off in pro mode and yada, yada, yada. But I should explain why I turn them off. And radius, if I had to go back and do it again, if we go to additional styling, there's a radius system, right? There's a base radius and a radius scale, which generates XS, S, M, L, XL, XXL, just like all the other classes do. But, you know, and this is probably because I'm not a big UI guy, but from experience, right? When you're doing UI, it's not like you're mixing and matching radiuses everywhere. Generally, it's like there's a radius for everything that's going to have a radius on the website. And so what I've been doing as of late is I just use radius M. That's the default radius. And I make this value whatever I want radius M to be. And then I don't use any of the others. I just don't use them. And, you know, now we get into the question of like, should you be able to turn them off? Well, in terms of radius, the radius system, it's probably like 0.00005 KB or something. It's like 8 lines of CSS. It's not, you wouldn't be turning off a lot, okay? So I don't really think it's that necessary. But I would just say, just start doing what I do, which is just use radius M for everything. And then there is the case of, I forgot what it's called, concentric radiuses, or I don't know what the technical term is, but it's the radius that is the radius that you're using plus the padding of the element. Okay, does anybody know the official name for that? To where the outer radius is actually a programmatically larger than the inner radius. We can make the case that there would be a variable and a utility class to accomplish that so that you don't have to use calcs and figure it out yourself. That's a possibility, but we haven't gotten there yet. Anyway, we're deep in the weeds of the radius system and probably don't need to be. So let's keep going. All right, I know 3.0 will have a better way, but until then I need a cheat sheet. Yeah, I know, So hopefully my explanation on that made sense. When I use auto balance of headings and content, is there a quick utility to disable it? Because sometimes the client doesn't like the break of the words in some page. Yes. Typography, automatically balance headings, automatically balance text. Let's turn that off. We'll just do a heading as an example. All right, so I am going to remove all this. We'll start over. Here's my heading. Okay, I'm gonna make this an H1. And we're just gonna go to website Ipsum again, and let's get one of these long headings. Okay, so this is with text balance on for headings. Now let's get a copy where text balance for headings is off. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this tab. That is with it off. There's on, there's off. Now, if you noticed, and this just happened to be the reality of what I pasted, there's an orphan, okay? And what text balance does is it makes sure that that orphan situation is corrected. But text balance, as it is right now, there's two versions of it. And the main version that's actually supported as a progressive enhancement is very heavy-handed. And it does a lot more than it needs to. Like, see how like short this paragraph is now? Because it's what it's trying to do is not just get rid of orphans. It's trying to balance the lines. Like, it wants every line to more or less have the same amount of words, which is not just getting rid of orphans. That's very heavy-handed. There's a new text wrap called Pretty that's coming that only takes care of orphans. It doesn't get super heavy-handed on what's going on with the line length, okay? So you run into a situation sometimes where this is undesirable, where it's like, wow, that was too heavy-handed. I don't like that, okay? And your question is a good one. And the answer is yes. You write the word unbalance. And there you go. Now it's unbalanced. It's back to the way that it was. And then if you're like, but there's an orphan, okay? Like, you want that in between. You're like, I don't want it to be heavy-handed, but I also don't want an orphan. Well, text wrap pretty doesn't exist yet. So we can't do that, but there is a solution. It's just a manual solution. You go to the end of the line right here, and you take these two words, right? An orphan is one word at the end of the line. So if there's two of them, there's no orphans. You can actually do this with 3 words if you wanted to. You join them together. So you take out the space, and then you put ampersand, NBSP, semicolon, and then you don't have an orphan anymore. And what that is the NBSP stands for non-breaking space. So I've added a non-breaking space, which keeps those words joined together, but visually they have a space. And if I did that again right here, at non-breaking space, it would put 3 words on the last line. And so this is a manual way of eliminating orphans until text wrap pretty exists. Once text wrap pretty exists, we can stop doing all this nonsense. And this will be replaced with text wrap pretty. Right now it's text wrap balance, right? We want to get rid of balance. We want to use pretty going forwards. Because I agree, it's too heavy-handed. And it has some other limitations. Like paragraphs, it can only do 3 lines of text in a paragraph. It can't do anything more than that. All right, hopefully that answers your question. Best resource for learning all the ACSS variables that are available. There's actually not a lot of them. Okay, there's not a lot of them. You literally bite the bullet, you build sites, and you do what I said at the very beginning of the stream. You read the documentation, but then you go write the variables without staring at the documentation. You force yourself to write without looking, okay? If you know and I would say also pay attention to the naming scheme of the variables, okay? So you don't have to, if we're doing spacing, for example, you don't have to memorize space S, space M, space L, space XL, space XXL. Space is the word. You already know that there's XS, S, M, L, XL, and XXL available. Okay, so you automatically know, by knowing one variable name, you actually know like 7 different variables, okay? And now take colors as an example. So we need to know that there's the name of the color. Well, they're called action and primary. And so memorize the names. Action, there's only like 6 of them, right? So they're easy to remember, especially if you've done a site or 2. And by knowing the name, just that one variable, action, you actually know like 40 different variables, okay? As long as you understand the scheme that they're written in, right? So if I want a shade of the action color, it's action, the name of the color I want, dash the name of the shade that I want. And if I know the shades are light, ultralight, whatever, dark, I know the variables. That's it, by default. Now we go one step further. I want a transparent version of a shade, okay? I need to know that the word is trans. That's all I'm looking for. So I have action, the name of the color. Then I have the name of a shade potentially. Doesn't have to be. Okay, so action trans 10 gives you the action color at 10%. Now, if I want one of the shade transparencies, it's just the name of the shade, action dark trans 10 gives me 10% of the dark version of the action color. Action light trans 10 gives me 10% of the light shade of the action color. And so there's literally like 40 different variables there, but they all follow the exact same scheme. And you know that there's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Okay, like that's a given. So all those variables don't have to be memorized. It's just the scheme of the variable needs to be memorized. And then you know all of them by default. Also, you don't have to know them because if you're in the builder and you're like, like with colors especially, right? Right click, there they are. This is gonna insert the variables and all the transparencies are all right there, okay? So you don't even have to know the names of the colors. And then you don't even have to know the names of the spacing, right? Or even the font size. Look, I just put in the variable for me. So using the contextual panels is really, really, really helpful in this regard. But I would still force yourself to learn because what did I say earlier? Writing CSS is empowering. And when you come down to the CSS box, you are going to want to just be like font size, text dim, and just know, right? And is that hard to memorize, like that the font size is mapped to a word called text? Not really, right? It's just a matter of a little bit of experience of just doing it a few times. And there's not a gazillion of them. There's a gazillion utility classes, but there's not a gazillion variables. There's a very small number of variables that just have little extensions on them. And the extensions are very easy to remember, because you use them all the time. So that's what I would say. But it comes down to like forcing yourself to write them a few times without looking at the documentation. Like when you see me, and people will say all the time, well, you remember them because you built the framework. There's parts of the framework that I don't remember at all writing. Like I go back and look at it and I've got to figure out like, how did I do this again? And I'm figuring out the loops and the logic and all that stuff. And that's the other thing. I didn't sit down and write every name of every class and every name of every variable. What I did is I came up with the naming convention and then I used Sass to loop through all of the options. So the variables are actually generated into the style sheet dynamically and the classes are generated into the style sheet dynamically. I didn't sit there and type them one by one and get them into my brain that way. I just memorized the naming convention and therefore I just know the classes. It all comes down to the naming convention, and then it comes down to just using them in your workflow over and over and over again, and it's become second nature, like anything else. It's like, how do you memorize the entire CSS spec for all the stuff that we typically do, right? And not have to look up the CSS, names for the properties over and over and over again. It's experience of just forcing yourself to do it, and it becomes second nature. All right, let's keep going. Technically, you don't need modifiers, so it's just BE. Actually, so the dynamic root selector made modifiers in BIM much more usable in page builders. My biggest complaint, and this is about all page builders, not just Bricks or Oxygen or whatever, is that you could really only use the BE part of BIM. Because if you wanted to use a modifier, what you had to do is statically reference the name of classes, which means if you rename the class, it's gonna break. And you kind of had to scatter your CSS a bit. And really what I would do is run back to like WP Codebox and do it there, because that was the most efficient way to do it. I haven't used WP Codebox in a while, actually, because of all the stuff I'm able to do with the dynamic root selector in Bricks. But now you can do, if we are in that my card situation, I can just throw it on here, it doesn't really matter. So there is like my card. And I wanted to create a dark version of my card. I can now do dark like this. And I can now come in and do dark. Look at this. I can do dark, and then I want to target the heading within dark. And I can write it all. This is true BIM right here. Now you can only do this in the CSS input, and you can only do it thanks to this dynamic root selector. Bricks and Quickly, I think, are the only two builders that allow you to do this properly. So that's fantastic, and I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, the M was lacking in BIM in page builders for a long time. Bricks and Quickly have solved this problem, and it's just another example of how far ahead, Bricks and Quickly are from other page builders. All right, let's keep going. Can you add a toggle that enables the ACSS options only to admins? Can't you already do that? Can't you just use like an admin access plugin of some sort and just say, hey, they're not allowed to see automatic CSS? I think you can already do that. Somebody let me know if you've done that already. Thanks, I didn't know you could use link base. I will try that later on. Yep, absolutely. I always right-click the context menu and feel ashamed because it's so easy. Yeah, you know, it's great for beginners. It's great for learning curve. It's great for getting things done to a point. It can become a crutch. And if you use it as a crutch, you won't actually get good at like, you know, learning I mean, you will over time eventually, but you'll slow down the rate at which you excel at using the framework. So I would say, you know, use it to get going, but don't use it as a crutch. I use it for colors, especially because the color names, the variable names are much longer for colors. And it's super fast to go in here and do this. But for almost everything else, especially because of the fact that you don't even have to write vars, you'll see me do this all the time. I'll just do double dash the name of the variable, hit enter, and move on with my life. Because like, even though this is still, I don't know, a lot of times I'm already using the keyboard and I don't know. It's just, that's my habit. That's what I do. All right, let's go back. I'm loving the idea of having that magic nameless radius formula be an option in ACSS. Yes, let's talk more about that. Not right now, but in the community. Maybe somebody start a thread for that. Because we have to do a little bit of brainstorming, like how is that variable going to know what padding you've used? Because it's a calculation based on the padding of the element. So there's a little bit to work out there, but I do think it's possible. I don't know if it's done or obsolete in ACSS 3.0, but in the back end, this thing's overlaid on my screen. But in the back end, the cheat sheet, right-click helpers also needed for the setting input fields. That would be great. That'll be obsolete in 3.0. That will be obsolete in 3.0. A lot will be obsolete in 3.0. 3.0 is going to change the game for, like, it's not, I mean, I've just playing with the initial like prototype of it and just watching and it's automatic CSS is already like it's just, for most users, it's like obviously number one, and for a lot of different reasons. And ACSS is not just a framework. I mean, there's 20, I still got to do a video on this, but I mapped them out. I was like, all right, we're going to list every feature in ACSS that's not in any other framework or tool. And there's like at least 20 of them. Like think about things like automatic header offset. Like when you have an overlay header, do you know how big of a pain in the ass that problem is to solve? And automatic CSS solves it in one click. So that kind of stuff. There's like at least 20 of those kinds of features. That's not even a framework feature. That's just a workflow feature. It's like, we know that's a problem in web design. Let's just solve it. ACSS does that in a lot of different ways. But now with 3.0, what 3.0 is going to do to people's workflow is it's unprecedented, and it's going to be, people are just instantly going to realize this is the premier tool. Like there's not even a question anymore. For whatever question is in people's minds right now, it won't be a question after 3.0. Is it bad to use non-breaking space for SEO since we combined words? That's a really good question. I've never even considered that. Now, I would say that if you're maybe combining keywords in that, I would go to Google. I've never looked that up. Why don't we do a little bit of research and let's verify? I don't want to speculate. Let's go ahead and verify and see what others have to say about that before I give an opinion. What I will say is it's a very common technique, and I've never heard any objections to it before, but that doesn't mean that there isn't somebody objecting for some reason somewhere that we need to listen to. So let's look that one up. 3.0 sounds like a big update. How smooth will the transition be? Is a lot getting deprecated? No, it's actually 3.0 does not change the framework very much. The framework stays the way that it is. 3.0 completely changes how you interact with the framework. So that's the big difference that we're working on. And that difference alone is like, and because it's our goal, right? What's the goal of using a framework? Obviously, consistency is a big factor. Efficiency is a big factor. Well, we have efficiency in terms of like going in and, contextual panels, right? Super efficient right here. We already talked about that. Right click, super efficient right here. These are all in-builder things that we can do to increase efficiency. But there's still a bunch of inefficiencies in how we interact with the framework. And those are all going to go away in 3.0, right? So it's like every next inefficiency that we eliminate, things are already fantastic. We can already build maintainable sites at light speed, right? You watch me in the tutorials. It's just banging out variables, right? Banging out variables everywhere and just, grids. It's like, I don't have to sit here and write min max 0 1 fr, min max 0 1 fr. It's just grid 3, boom, move on with my life. 3-column grid. I can do auto grids. I can do all of that efficiency is already fantastic. Now imagine there's just no other inefficiencies beyond that. Because right now there are. Now I don't want to speak to them until we're ready, but trust me, and this is the benefit of, hey, this tool is not built in theory. This tool is literally used by its creator every single day of life on Earth. I use Automatic CSS every day for every project at every time for everything. And so best believe that I understand where the headaches still exist. Whereas other tools that are built in theory, it's like give WordPress as an example. I won't even use other frameworks as an example. Matt Mullenweg does not run an agency. Okay, he does not build sites with WordPress very often. He actually said that on the live stream yesterday or whenever that was. He was like, I don't build sites that often, right? So we have a person leading a tool who doesn't actually use the tool day in and day out for real work, okay? That's kind of a problem because a lot of stuff happens in theory or relying on the ideas and experiences of others. And in the case of WordPress, it's like hundreds of people or thousands of people, and everybody's got their own competing ideas and whatever. Automatic CSS I use it every single day. And so I know exactly where the inefficiencies still are, and I know how it interacts in real world scenarios, and I can continue removing every piece of inefficiency until it's like almost perfection. I don't think we'll ever achieve perfection, especially because things continue to change and evolve, but that's what we're striving for. And there's a couple big areas that are still headaches, and those headaches are about to go away. And once other people just recognize, like, wow, like you're going to use 3.0 and you're just, what I imagine and what I hope for is just, you're just continuing to do your workflow, but you have a giant smile on your face because you're like, damn, I didn't know it could get this much better. That's kind of like what I hope your experience is about to be. With 3.0, will the ACSS panel be available from within the builder? I can't speak to the details of exactly what is about to happen. But as we get closer, and I've already started to do like very abstract sneak peeks, like lots of abstraction, lots of like very nebulous screenshots. I shared a couple of them. I'll be doing a few more. But really, we don't want to give a ton away. And we just want to see, there will be, I will say this, most likely, you want to be active in the community, in the ACSS private community, and you want to pay attention to emails, okay? Because at some point, there very likely will be a very tight, controlled group of alpha/beta testers that get an initial version, okay? If you want to potentially be in that group, you've got to pay close attention. I'm not going to publish this everywhere. I'm not going to make some giant public call. It's going to be for the people who pay attention, okay? Anybody has a chance to get in, but you got to be paying attention. Is ACSS compatible with generate blocks or generate press theme still a thing? I have a couple of client scenarios where GenPress is the only answer and want to use ACSS. Yes, it is compatible with generate. It is mostly compatible with Gutenberg native blocks, but they keep changing stuff. Man, it's like hard to keep up with them. And it's just the whole Gutenberg canvas is kind of a nightmare to work within and like hook into. So there's some things that still need to be worked out. The other, there is a big downside too to the Gutenberg canvas that I don't hear anybody really talking about or thinking, and it has to do with templating, okay? So if we imagine something right now, like if let me show you in the dashboard. If I go to viewport and I go to website background color and I change this to black, now my website background is going to be black. And if I have Gutenberg turned on, okay, let's go to Gutenberg, options, Gutenberg. Okay, it's all on, right? I have all these on. Now I go into Gutenberg to edit a page. The canvas of Gutenberg is going to be black. And that's kind of annoying because let's say now I'm writing a blog post. Well, Gutenberg, there's no way to tell Gutenberg, hey buddy, I'm editing a blog post and my blog post template has a white area where this text is going to show up in. So you don't need to be black. You need to be white. There's no way to inform Gutenberg of that fact because Gutenberg is a dumb canvas. It's not like a page builder. Like if I open Bricks, Bricks knows what template I'm editing. Gutenberg is white all the time, right? And so I know that I can just write my blog post in a white environment where that's where most people want to write their blog post in. And when I publish it, it can be published to a black environment or a white environment or a purple environment. It doesn't really matter. And in the builder, when I'm designing that template, I can see the template I'm designing. Well, Gutenberg has to be black because you edit pages in Gutenberg the same way you edit posts in Gutenberg. There's no difference. It's just Gutenberg. And so there's no way to tell it, hey dog, I'm not editing a page right now. I don't want you to be black. I want you to be white because I'm editing a post. No way to inform Gutenberg of that fact. Whereas in page builders, that problem does not exist because page builders know what you're editing. It's not a dumb canvas. Gutenberg is a dumb canvas. People will be like, that's not very nice. I'm just using the technical term. It doesn't know what I'm trying to do. Therefore, it's dumb. So it's not an insult. It's just a fact. I just found ACSS a few days ago. It just blew my mind as a WordPress user. I have a question about the smooth scrolling function. Which JS library is used for it? Hey, Noel, fantastic question. Really good thing to bring up. We got to talk about this. People ask this all the time. They're confused by it. They claim that it causes conflicts with certain things. None of these things are true, okay? Let's go over this. So I believe in options, you're gonna see it right here. Smooth scrolling, enable CSS smooth scrolling. CSS being the key word. This is one line of CSS. That's it. This adds one line of CSS, no JavaScript, okay? If you turn that off, it will remove that line of CSS, no problem whatsoever. And what this is used for is smooth scroll to hash links. And this is the correct way to implement smooth scrolling. JavaScript implementations are actually not good, okay? And I'll tell you why in just a second. The reason we put this here, knowing that it's one line of CSS, like anybody can just add the one line of CSS and get this on their website. So why did we bother to put it in behind a toggle and all this stuff? When we developed the framework, we were using Oxygen. Oxygen uses JavaScript smooth scrolling. And people would want to turn that off after I inform them that it's not great. And then they'd be like, but how do I get smooth scrolling? And then I'd be like, well, you have to copy paste the snippet. Well, all right, we got rid of all that. ACSS just does this by default now. And I tell people in your page builder, turn off JavaScript smooth scrolling. If you add a plugin like Bricks Ultimate or whatever, I don't even know if that's a thing in it, but don't let anything implement JavaScript smooth scrolling on your website. Why? Because almost every implementation of it breaks accessibility. There's something called tab index, right? On a long page. I don't think I have any anchor links here, but we can use it to demonstrate. Let's say this button dropped me down here. okay? And let's go to right here. Maybe something about frames. Here we are, right? If I use JavaScript smooth scrolling for that, and now that I'm down here, and let's say I fired that button with the keyboard because I'm a keyboard user, okay? And it brings me all the way down here. Bang. And now I want to navigate to this button right here. So I hit tab again to get it to go to this button. Nope. You know what happens with JavaScript? The page stays here, but your selection of items, your focus indicator, stays on all of the things up here, and you have no idea what you're focusing on, and you're definitely not focusing on that next thing you wanted to focus on, because JavaScript smooth scrolling does not bring the focus with it in almost every implementation I've seen. But CSS smooth scrolling, because it's a native smooth scrolling function, does bring tab index with it. So using CSS smooth scrolling, if I hit tab, see how that tabbed me back to the top? Because I just scrolled down manually, right? And the tab index brought me up here. But if I tab with CSS smooth scrolling and then hit tab again, it's gonna select this button right here, and it's gonna start the tab index from that point forwards. So CSS smooth scrolling is accessible. JavaScript smooth scrolling, not accessible. Hopefully that answers the question. Will you bless us with a work with Kevin session today? Tyree's talking about in the inner circle. I don't think I can do it today. I've already done a long 3.0 meeting. Then I immediately got on here. I only have so much stamina, Tyree, okay? And I could, but then my brain gets fried. It's like, yeah, I could be there, but my brain gets fried at some point. And I've done like 3 tutorials this week already. It's getting crazy. Maybe Thursday is going to be another live stream for Frames, I think. Maybe Friday. I will try to plan a work with Kevin session for Friday. All right, last questions, final questions, and then we got to get out of here. We are at time, but I will do a couple more if need be. You should show us 3.0. We won't tell anyone. Yeah, I'm keeping 3.0 pretty tightly controlled. I thought when I create a grid on a class, let's see how many viewers. See, we still got a lot of viewers, even though the question slowed down. All the viewers are still here. I thought that, and there's a lot of beginners. I mean, hey, if you're a beginner right now and you haven't asked a question and you're like, my question's probably dumb, like it's probably just real dumb, go ahead and ask it. Like, perfect time to ask. There's no dumb questions. Seriously, like don't be afraid to ask. This is your last call. This is your final opportunity. Ask your questions that you think might be dumb. I thought that when I create a grid on a class and have the auto grid gap activated in the back end, it will add the grid gap, but it doesn't. What it does add is a gap of content gap. Let's go over this. Okay, so we'll start from here. Here's my grid. Let's put in some images in this grid. Let's keep it nice and easy. I have one placeholder image. Fantastic. Okay, we'll just use that a bunch. 6. All right. So if I go to display grid right here, and I say grid 2, is this may be what you're talking about. And we're going to go here, and we're going to inspect this. And we're going to see that we have down here. Where's it coming from? Gap, content gap. Oh, sorry. I forget that we are covering things up. Okay. Here is the panel right here. And I'm seeing this. Content gap is in the grid. It's not in the grid. All right. Let's get rid of the grid. This is a good question. It is a good question. Notice that when this is not a grid, it still has a gap of content gap. And that's because when you're here on spacing and you say, hey, I want to use automatic content spacing. What automatic CSS says is, oh, you've put a container here. And typically you put content inside the container, right? So if I put heading, text, button, see how those things are not touching each other? That's because of automatic content gap. That's happening within the context of a container by default. If I turn that container into a grid, Automatic CSS does not know that that container is now told to be a grid by bricks. There's no way of it knowing that. So when you do grid 3 or something, see the grid and it has a gap, that gap is still the content gap because ACSS has not been informed that this is actually a grid. Now, how do we inform Automatic CSS that this is in fact a grid? Well, if you use a grid utility class, now ACSS has been informed that this is a grid. And even though we can't see it, we can still inspect it. So there's the div right there. And we come down and we see, look at that. It has a grid gap now instead of the content gap because based on the use of the utility class, we now know that that is a grid. Remember that a variable is just a value. It's just a token for a value. There's no, we don't, even though it's called grid 3, ACSS has no way to know that you've established a grid in this container because there's no way to analyze a specific value for something. So the other thing you can do, if you do, let me put this image back. Let's go here, here, here. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we're gonna make this a manual grid with grid 3. So the auto gap, now you would just come in and put in your grid gap. Like you're already here writing variables, that's where you would just establish your grid gap. And notice that even though I automatically had a content gap there, it's easily overridden. And you can override it at the class because it uses a where statement. It has no specificity whatsoever. You can override it with a class, with a global styling, whatever you want to override it with, you can easily override it. So it doesn't hurt anything for it to be there. But yes, you're correct that it won't automatically establish grid gap because it doesn't know that that's a grid. Unless you use the utility class, then it knows and it will use grid gap. Hopefully that answers that question. Can you make a field in ACF that will allow the selection of the color that will be used for the color of the button in the post? Did this like a chump a week ago. Yeah, there's a bunch of ways to do that. If you're in the inner circle, I would go in and search for that. I swear I've seen that no less than like a dozen times. And not just people asking it, but people actually sharing the method that they use to do it. And you could use it with, a PHP callback. You can use it with data attributes. You can do that. There's a number of different ways you can achieve that. Depending on your use case, you want to just weigh the pros and cons. And then if you just ask, people will answer and you'll get your answer right away. But we also need more details. Tell exactly what you want to have happen and what you're trying to change and why. Okay, what is a solid way to alternate a 3-2 grid, for example? Really good question. Let's see if we can remember this off the top of my head. So if I go, let's go with a section, and let's go inside of this container. This container is going to be our wrapper. Let's go with a block. Now, this is really only applies if you're using utility classes, because again, the only way Automatic CSS can talk to itself is if it knows what you're doing. So this wouldn't be like the most scalable, maintainable way to do this, but it is a way to do it. Let's say that this is going to be a card, and we're going to put a block inside the card, and that's going to be a media wrapper. This is going to be a content wrapper. We actually want the content to come first. Okay, inside the content wrapper, we're going to have a heading. We're going to have text. Perfect. This would be like, the using pure utility classes, which I don't tend to do, but it is a way to do it. So like here, you would say content gap. You'll see people doing this kind of stuff all the time. I don't recommend this method. But if you don't know how to auto alternate grids, grid, let's do a grid 2, 3 or something, because this actually even makes the situation more difficult. This is where justify center. This would actually be align items to the center. There we go there. Okay, and maybe we're ready to duplicate this at this point. Awesome. Okay, and maybe duplicate that there. So now there's 3. And if I remember correctly, grid alternate and then L. There we go. Bang. Boom. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay. And then you're like, whoa, Kevin, what about mobile? And I'm like, let's see. Okay, that's there. So all we need is really grid, what would this be? Grid 1 on each of these. So we would say grid 1 on, I believe, L, because we're doing L and up. So this would be L and down. See if I'm thinking about this properly. Grid L1. No, it'd be M1, I guess at this point. Grid M1. This is actually combining min width media queries and max width media queries. I think grid 1 is the one that we want, which would then have to be put on those two. Okay. And now let's see if, there we go. And then in this case, because you're using utility classes, you do kind of need to just not go super awesome with your DOM. This is kind of the limitation of utility classes, but it does show you how you can achieve exactly what you want very, very quickly with utility classes. Because the auto alternation of these, by the way, has to, when it's 2-3, it has to also alternate to the 3-2, which is a little bit more complicated than like a 50-50 grid that has to alternate. But that's how you do it with utility classes. It's this grid alternate utility class on a parent container will identify the type of grid you put on the cards inside of it and then alternate that structure automatically. Now, would I tell you to do it that way? No, that's the like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing and I just need these things to alternate. That's how you do it. But if you want to learn, then you do it the way that I did it in the tutorial yesterday with custom BIM classes and your own CSS. There's unfortunately no automatic way to do that. You just have to write the CSS. And the end result of doing it the way I showed yesterday in the tutorial at Geary.co is it's fully maintainable and fully scalable. Whereas you just saw me right there. It was like I had to delete cards and then re-add them because I forgot a utility class on them. And like that's the chump stuff I talk about all the time. And utility classes does not save you from Chumpville. Right? Like it is, and that's why I see people all the time when they do this. Here we go. Grid, like the grids, like you can use the utility classes on the grid. It's not that big of a deal. The idea of creating a card with utility classes is just as bad as ID styling. I don't know, for some reason, certain people can't get this in their head. I'm just gonna demonstrate for you right now. Because I do think this is really, really, really important. This should actually have 2 blocks inside of it, and then we'll put the heading in there, and we'll put the text in there, and we'll put the button in there. And then we'll call this media. I mean, it doesn't really matter because you're not even using classes at this point. I mean, you're doing this like a savage anyway. Why would you bother naming things? Content wrapper. Yeah, this is absolute savagery right here. This is like the tailwind approach. This is fine if you're writing, you know, this stuff in HTML, but like in a page builder, this makes no sense whatsoever. So here's my card right here. And so I go, all right, you know what I need on this card? I need padding, right? So you're gonna go up here and you're gonna type in padding and you're gonna go padding M. Then you're gonna come to your content wrapper and you're gonna say, I need a content gap, right? So we go to here and we do, all right, there's my content gap. You know what else I need on this card? I need a background color. So I'm gonna go background with, and people like, I get it, like it seems easy. It seems like I'm just rocking and rolling, right? On my card, I'm gonna need a content gap here too, right? So I go content gap on my card. Then I'm gonna need a radius. So I search for radius and there's my border radius right there. I get my M on there and man, I mean, I am just flying through this, right? There we go. And here's my button. Oh, I forgot I need on here, I need my button action, right? So let's go to button and choose the action button. Man, this is just absolutely phenomenal. Look at the ROI that I'm producing on this, okay? And then I probably just need to, did I get space M, pad M on there? Okay, that's good. Just duplicate. I mean, man, we are just absolutely flying. But now. See, everybody thinks about, oh, it's just so fast. What's the fastest workflow? What gets us from point A to point B? And I said in the very beginning, this got you to the edge of the cliff super fast. And now all that's left is you just jump off and you die. That's the only part that's left. Because now you think about that, like what if you did this throughout an entire website? Okay, and now Bev comes along and she's like, oh, by the way, we decided we don't like the border radius. We don't like, and think you already put all the content in these cards. Let's not pretend that this is all the same content. It's all new content. It's all unique content. Bev's like, we don't like the background color of those cards. We don't like the border radius that you put in. By the way, you also forgot to put the border radius on the images. I mean, I don't know why you didn't do that. So we need that done. Just make the border radius smaller, add it to the images. We need to change that from the ultralight color you use to a lighter color or a little bit darker color, whatever. Can you make the text in here small by chance? The things that Bev typically talks about. Here's what your life is like now. So you're like, okay, fuck, what did she say? She said, all right, she said to increase the padding. All right, we'll do that. All right, that's done. She said to change the border radius. So we actually need rounded S on here. We forgot to do it on the images. Okay, let's put that on there. Rounded S. And then what is she? Oh, she wanted this to be smaller. Okay, now that's smaller. We need to, what else did she say to do? Oh, the background color, that's right. We got to take that one off. We got to come back in here. We got to put in this little bit darker color. All right, I think she's going to like that. And then before you do anything else, my God, you better ask her. You better ask her because all those changes that I just did, congratulations, champ. You changed one instance of this card. Now you know what your life is going through and doing that same exact thing to every one of these cards. You would actually have been better to style that card at the ID level. Why? Because at least you could go in and say, copy styles, and then paste them to all these other cards. But you can't paste styles across different pages. So you're gonna have to remember every page you use these cards on and make sure you find every instance of them to paste the styles to. One by one by one by one by one for however many times you created this problem. This is why I always say, don't use utility classes, don't style at the ID level. There is no debate about this. This is objectively awful. Anybody who has lived this life should be able to tell you that this is objectively awful. You know who will tell you this is not that awful? People who don't know how to use classes. They don't know how to organize their classes. They don't know BIM. They just don't know the fundamentals. So they insist that like copy paste is not all that bad. It's atrocious. It's awful. And if you ever inherit a website where they haven't used classes and haven't organized their classes, you will understand immediately the nightmare that is those websites. Nobody wants to inherit them. Nobody wants to maintain them. And then you go to the client and you tell the client, I hate to inform you, but this whole website has to be rebuilt. And they're like, I spent $10,000 on that website. And it's like, well, you gave $10,000 to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. That's what happened here. And that's very unfortunate. Somebody's got to fix the problem and it's not free. That's just an uncomfortable conversation to have with the client. So just build with fundamentals. I don't know why we all can't there's a bunch of people out there who just don't want to get on the same page with that. They're like, no, fundamentals don't matter. There's no such thing as fundamentals. There's no such thing as best practices. Do whatever you want. I don't know why we are staring objective reality in the face. Okay. There's no way around this. So it's just the people that accept reality and the people that deny reality at this point. And yeah, they will deny this reality, a lot of them, because their page builder doesn't allow for the better reality. And what they would have to admit is, you're right, I've been using an inferior tool. I've been using an inferior tool, and I've been building websites with an inferior process. For some people, that is hard to admit. And instead of admitting it, they will just deny that there is a better reality. And that sucks. That sucks. Like, we have to be able to put our ego aside enough to be like, you're right, that's a better way. And we should adopt that. I didn't come up with this method. Okay. I didn't create BIM. I didn't create the concept of classes. Here's what happened. I had this conversation with with a very large creator the other day. We don't even need to talk about names, who I'm good friends with. I'm good friends with this creator. And we had this conversation from a philosophical perspective. And here's how it went. He was like, I didn't start out as a developer, right? I came into this as like just a regular guy. And his channel has, to give you context, because, I don't want you to think it's somebody that it's actually not. He has over 100,000 subscribers, okay? So that narrows it down, but you still don't know who it is. But you know who it's not, right? If it's under 100,000, not them, all right? He has over 100,000 subscribers. And he said to me, he's like, I wasn't a developer when I came into this stuff. And he's like, it's been fascinating for me to watch your channel because what you've actually done, like when all these page builders came out, nobody was talking about classes. Nobody was talking about the maintainability of websites. Nobody was talking about any of this stuff, right? And that's all you talk about. You talk about that stuff every single video, like to drive the message home. And now look what's happening in the industry. Elementor is talking about unveiling a class system for the builder, right? Bricks has the development of bricks and the popularity of bricks. Look at people flocking now to page builders that have a class first workflow. Okay, this isn't just a coincidence, right? It requires people advocating for it. But what he said, what was like the most interesting part of the discussion that he acknowledged is, he's like, all you did was advocate for this stuff. It's not like you invented it. You're not like protecting your own idea and invention. This is how development always was done before page builders. Ask anybody who writes CSS. What are they writing? They're writing classes. It was page builders that pretended you don't need them. Page builders I'm not bringing a new context to web design. Page builders tried to bring a new context to web design. They tried to bring the context that you don't need classes and maintainability doesn't matter. That was the underlying argument is, does maintainability matter or does it not matter? I'm in the camp that it matters. Now, some people will say it doesn't matter. I want to hear their reasons for why it doesn't matter. Because I think what it boils down, because when I press them, guess what? They don't have any reasons. They don't have any examples. What they have is, you're hurting my ego. Because I've spent the last 3 years building client websites in Elementor, and I'm not ready to admit that I've built unmaintainable websites. That's basically what it comes down to. It's an ego thing. They're either willing to admit that they've built unmaintainable websites, and they're committed to maintainability going forwards, or, well, there is no other or, right? That's it. Like, they're either willing to admit it or they're not willing to admit it. What they can't show you is, no, you've got it all wrong. I can still build maintainable websites with Elementor. They cannot demonstrate that. That is not a demonstratable thing. Unless you manually put a class on everything in Elementor and then write everything in your CSS style sheet by default. And then nobody would do that because it's an absolute nightmare. Not a nightmare because you have to write CSS, but the DOM is a nightmare at that point. You can't target things properly because the DOM is so messy. There is nobody building maintainable websites in Elementor. It is not possible or practical, okay? So when somebody defends Elementor, what they're saying is, at the end of the day, maintainability does not matter to me. That's what they are saying. And I hope their client doesn't hear that, because I can't tell you, like, it is awful. Like, all these Elementor sites out there, every client that comes to me, I'm like, I can't do anything for you. I'm sorry. All these things that you want done to this site, I just cannot do them without billing you 5 times as many hours as it should take because of how this website was built and what it was built with. That is a real conversation. And so people are like, why does it matter? It matters because we're screwing over clients. There are real people on the other end of the contracts who thought they were hiring somebody who was going to build them something the right way. It's like when I take my car to a mechanic. I assume they're not using duct tape, okay? I'm not looking under the hood to like double check all their work, but I assume they're not using duct tape. But when people, like real clients paying tens of thousands of dollars, and by the way, it's not the cost of the website. And I will stay here all day to die on this hill. It is not the cost of the website, just the cost of the website. These people are running businesses that feed families, and they rely on things like conversions and sales and rankings and performance and on and on and on and on and on. And they require a website that can be iterated on and scaled and easily maintained, right? That doesn't end up having so much technical debt that it has to be lit on fire at some point. That's basically what happens. And so not only is the money they're paying for the site going down the drain, but there's lost opportunity cost. We have to look at both sides of economics. There's a direct spend side of things. There's also a lost opportunity cost side of things. For a website I'm not able to do the things that the client needs to do. Therefore, the project sits and sits and sits for a month or 2 or 3, right? While we rebuild it, that's lost opportunity cost. We're not doing the things that we wanted to do to move the business forward because we're redoing work that was already done wrong. That's bad, okay? Again, I say it, broken window fallacy. Back to economic principles. This is not good for economics of the business or the industry or anything else. So my argument is there are real victims of bad websites. They're called clients who sign contracts and pay real money and lose real money while everybody here in Elementor land tinkers around with their ego. That's a problem, all right? That is a problem. So all you have to do is look at what the person is saying. When I bring up the maintainability issue, they're either going to be able to say, no, I can still build maintainable websites, watch me, and they'll actually demonstrate it on video. That's never happened, by the way. Never happened. I've asked many, many, many times. It's never happened. Or they'll just say, it doesn't matter. Maintainability doesn't matter. None of this matters. Do whatever you want to do. Use whatever tool you want to use. Now, it's up to you at the end of the day, which argument you want to align yourself with, which argument you find acceptable. To me, if I was going to say, no, you're wrong, and this is why I produce hundreds of hours of video content, because when I have a principle or a philosophy that I want to advocate for, I feel a responsibility to demonstrate that, to prove it. We can't just run our mouth. We actually have to show somebody. Like, hey guys, I think we should do it this way. Here's why. Here's all the reasons. Look, you can see it. You can watch me. And then I even show, here's how we used to do it. And here's why this way is more awful, less bad. Whatever, however you want to sprinkle sugar on it, you do that. I don't sprinkle sugar on things. I just tell like what I think, okay? But shouldn't it bother you if somebody's like, no, that doesn't matter, right? Use the Kevin Hart voice. No. I love that. I need that. I need to clip that. Yeah, in the Kevin Hart voice. No. But they never demonstrate. They never show you. They never say, wait a minute. No, Kevin, you're right. I think maintainability of a website is very important, but here's where you're wrong about Elementor. Let me show you how I build maintainable websites in Elementor. Not a single fucking video. Millions of Elementor. Any one of you, please stand up. Show me on a video how you build maintainable websites with Elementor. I would love nothing more than to watch that video. It doesn't exist. And it will continue to not exist. But you know what does exist? The people who will continue to say, Elementor's a great tool. Use whatever tool you want. It's fantastic, whatever, right? I don't know. It seems very clear cut to me. And, I hope, am I the only one? I mean, you guys can tell me in the chat. Just be like, Kevin, you are a lunatic. You've completely misunderstood Elementor and Divi, okay? And the need for maintainability, Kevin, that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All that matters is we just get to the finish line as fast as we can. We cash the check, and to hell with the client after that. D123 does not like the rants. He does not like the rants. I don't know why. I think this is the number one thing. Here's, they say in relationships, right? You are treated in your relationships to the degree that you are willing to accept from the person you're in the relationship with. We are in a relationship with page builder developers, and we will be given whatever we tolerate, okay? They will continue to feed us force feed us even. Dumb page builders that lack functionality, that have bad DOMs, that have styling at the ID level, on and on, because that was the standard. That's the standard Elementor set, and that's the standard the Divi set. It was all about like, let's just make it easy for anybody to slap some shit together. That was the goal. The goal was not like, let's make a tool that makes it easy for people to build maintainable websites. The goal was, let's make it easy for anybody to slap some shit together. And that's what people did. And to call that a professional tool, nah, that's a stretch, okay? We have Bricks, and we have the Bricks team giving us great features because at some point when you start demanding it, right? When we started demanding clean code, when we started ranting about the poor code produced by Elementor and Divi, that's when Oxygen and Bricks showed up. Like, hey, we can do something different. We can make clean code. And then, you know, they came out with a class first builder because we talk about that. And everything, variable support. I chirped and chirped and chirped at the Generate Press team. Emails, messages, comments, chirp, chirp, chirp. Why doesn't it support variables in the inputs? Why doesn't it support variables in the inputs? Guess what we got? Variables in the inputs. Because if you demand like, hey, this is important stuff. You have to rant about it and talk about it because things actually do change. Things actually do change. But if you're just like, nah, we don't need to rant about this again. We don't need to talk about this anymore. Guys, I'm telling you right now, if I keep ranting about this, the industry will change. More people will care about maintainability. More people will care about accessibility. It's going to take ranting about accessibility for more people to come around and accept the idea that that's important. A lot of various aspects that we talk about, if we're not constantly keeping it in the narrative, nobody will care. And people will continue to give us exactly what we deserve, which is nothing we need because we decided it's not important enough to talk about anymore. Got to keep talking about it. Well, we already did, yeah, I know. You're here for ACSS. We just did 2 hours of ACSS. So we're closing with a rant. And by the way, it's not that you're already sold on ACSS. It's, you know, things are going to change in the future. And so what I'm setting up is here's how we need to think about things because shiny object syndrome is a real thing. The next shiny object that comes along, people are like, ooh, flashy, flashy. Okay. But if you're not training yourself to think about maintainability and best practices and things like that, you might find yourself dabbling in a little shiny object over here that actually degrades site quality, degrades workflow. And it's not a direction we need to go in. So it's a very, and by the way, you're not the only one here, right? There's a lot of beginners here. There's a lot of first timers here. There's a lot of people who haven't heard this rant before who need to hear it. Something we got to talk about all the time. All right. At least Elementor has a spacer element. That is the ultimate troll comment right there. Like, I love it. I mean, A+, you know how to troll me. A+. I've gone on deep rants about the spacer element as well. Okay, that's gonna be it for today. Let's see, I think it was class related, but it was beyond my years back then. That's why I've been in Elementor. I'll just run through the chat real quick. Kevin, you're right. That's why I switched over to you. Moving on. You said, have you stopped answering questions for today? Daniel, if you have a question, I will answer it for you. And then I'm getting out of here. But you got to be quick on the keyboard. If you haven't asked by the time I get back to the bottom of the chat, it's not getting answered today. How do you charge when you want to rebuild their Elementor site to stay sane? Guys, I'll tell you right now, like, I feel bad. I feel bad for clients. I hate. A lot of people would be like, oh my God, give me all the Elementor rebuilds. I just take the checks to the bank. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I hate it. I hate telling you. I've given deep discounts because I'm like, look, your situation sucks. I hate the fact that you paid them so much money. I feel bad that I had to break this news to you. Like, I've given like 30% discounts before. I want to rescue you from this situation you're in. I legitimately feel bad for them. So I just don't like it. I wish it would stop. I wish people would stop building bad sites. That's the ultimate goal that I want. It's economically beneficial for people to continue building bad sites because then I get to rebuild them for a fee. But I don't want that to be what we're doing. That's not what our industry, and ultimately that's bad for the industry. It will be like, oh, that's a used car industry. Like everybody's a scammer. Nobody knows how to do their job right. Like I don't want anything to do with that industry. That's not the perception we want clients to have. We want clients to have the perception of like, oh, these people are like fucking brain surgeons. Like I can trust damn near every one of them. Like they all study, they all do their homework, they all care about their job, they all have attention to detail. They're gonna all do me right. That's the perception we ultimately want people to have. And by the way, when people have that perception of an industry, the price skyrockets. The price goes up. Like if you want to get like paid what you're worth, it starts with the entire industry being worth more. Okay, like a rising tide does lift all ships. Every person out there who's like, use whatever tool you want, standards don't matter, there's no best practices, they are reducing the value of the industry as a whole. They are putting more junk into the world, more bad projects, more disappointed clients, more problems, and the value goes down. The more people that get on board with standards and best practices and attention to detail and making unbreakable situations, now the value of the industry goes up. More clients having good experiences, more clients getting served well, more clients not getting abandoned and screwed over. Industry value goes up. This affects all of us. It affects all of us. Websites do not exist within a vacuum. Let's see, why the utility classes exist. Oh, why did the utility classes exist? I've been curious. They actually don't need to exist. A lot of them. I mean, some of them do. Some of them legitimately speed up workflow and they don't decrease maintainability. But by and large, the vast majority of the utility framework, the utility class side of the framework, doesn't really need to exist. That's why pro mode exists. You can just turn it off and you can follow best practices. But again, there's users who just don't want to get on board with that, and they would rather continue to use the utility classes. There may be a point at which we convert, and we're just like, you know what? That side of things doesn't need to exist, and it's dangerous. Like, there's no reason to take that risk right now. It's like we'll cross that bridge when we get there. That requires more conversations, and it requires more because, guys, Tailwind is still a big concept. Like, there's a lot of people, when they realize you can use, here's the thing. They realize you can use utility classes for everything in Automatic CSS because they have used Tailwind in the past, or they believe in the Tailwind approach, even though, I say vocally all the time, don't use Tailwind in page builders. Don't use that approach in page builders. It's awful. I just showed you why. They will still adopt ACSS. And then you know what? A month or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 down the road, I get an email. They're like, Kevin, I came from Tailwind. I started out using the utility classes in ACSS. I ignored all your videos talking about how utility classes aren't great in page builders. I'm now converted. I've seen exactly like what you talk about, and now I've converted over to using variables and custom classes. So because those utility classes existed, I was actually able to bring somebody in and get them on the path. And then eventually down the line, they were like, you're right, we don't need to use those anymore. So, in a way, they're still beneficial in that regard. All right, let's see if my man asked his question. Let's see. Daniel says, I want to answer a question. This is not a customer of yours. Okay, Daniel, just Frames TOC. Oh, he had a question about, okay, well, Daniel, you may not have been here in the very beginning. We said this is only ACSS questions. Frames is Thursday. We got a live stream on Thursday for Frames. I will answer all Frames questions on Thursday. But if there's a bug in the table of contents, here's what I'll tell you. Table of contents was the very first component we ever built, and we have learned a ton since then. I have no doubt there's a couple bugs in the table of contents. We've also seen it as like one of the low-level components, like modal instant fixes. Slider, instant fixes. Like, I don't want to mess around with those components. They're really, really, really important components. A table of contents component to me is like a progressive enhancement to a website. It's not like a critical thing. So we're rebuilding the talk after ACSS 3.0 is released. And I'll just be honest with everybody, it's going to be after the menu builder as well. So the menu builder is going to get priority. Then we're going to wrap back around to the table of contents and rebuild it, because it's one of those components that we built at the very beginning. It's not the best that it can be. It's not great. It's not worth fixing. It just needs to be rebuilt. So that's the plan for that. Okay. Do you need a YouTube moderator? I mean, yeah, I could use one, but schedules and all that stuff, it's a little bit, it's better for me to just flip on the camera, flip on the live stream, do my thing. And, you know, it's not perfect, but it gets the job done. But maybe we, you know, think about that going forwards. All right. I love you guys. Really, I do. It's been 2 full hours. I have to get out of here. I got more work that needs to be done. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for entertaining the rants. Thank you for being on board, right, with everything. We are working very, 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 very hard on 3.0. We do, I don't like gas things up. I really feel like this is a workflow game changer for a framework, and I'm super excited to bring it to you guys as soon as possible. There's no intentional delays or anything like that. It's a major, major, major overhaul, but I think it is well worth it. And I can't wait. I can't wait to have it as a user, but I also can't wait for you guys to have it. So I'm out. Love you guys. I'll be back very, very soon. Peace.